In this video, we will review 3 schools of thought regarding mythology. Before we get started, let's remember that these schools of thought are based on certain biases regarding the people associated with a particular myth. Our objective is not to make judgments about people, but rather to find new ways to observe myth. We do not intend to make subjective or qualitative commentary about people, society, or culture. As before, we will be using these schools of thought as tools to develop a more profound connection to myth. The first school of thought is Euhemerism. This school of thought is based on the ideas of Euhemerus of Mycenae, who lived from 330 to 260 BCE. This school of thought considers ancient people as primitives who lack science, philosophy, and intellectual development. The ancients, they say, perceived the past through the lens of superstition and imagination. As a result, they exaggerated the events of the past, and over a time, these events got more and more blown out of proportion, eventually reaching mythic proportions. For example, from the perspective of a Euhemerist, Zeus was a real king. He was most likely big and strong. He most likely held a lot of power and achieved great feats. Over time, however, the ancients converted a real person into a god who wields lightning bolts. The second school of thought is the nature school. This way of thinking about myth is a derivation of the work of Johann Gottfried Herder, who lived from 1744 to 1803. Herder asserted that people are directly influenced by their physical environment, both in their disposition and body type, and that physical environment indirectly influences sociocultural values. Building on this idea, the nature school sought to identify the environmental cause of a myth. For example, in Quetzalcoatl Rescues the Bones and Discovers Corn, Quetzalcoatl descends into the Mayan underworld. From the perspective of the nature school, this idea of an underworld comes from an environmental cause. For example, the existence of enormous sinkholes with interlinking systems of caves and caverns makes people think that there is an underworld. So, we go from a geological phenomenon to a mythic place. This is a representation of a lord descending into Xibalba, the Mayan place of fear, an underground realm. The third school of thought is the myth-ritual school. This way of thinking is a derivation of the work of Sir James Frazer, who lived from 1854 to 1941, and who sought to discover the ways in which myth functions in society. Building on the idea of myth as a functional document, the myth-ritual school saw myth as a set of guidelines for how to perform rituals. For example, the Bhagavad Gita has the function of explaining to its readers how to establish a spiritual practice. Specifically, it gives instructions for how to meditate.